Using words as an art form, as a vehicle to convey history and emotions and social justice, it's not really a new concept. Thinking about the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, thinking about the inaugural Poetry Slam in the early 1980s, even before that, accessing words, conveying stories, engaging imagination, provoking thoughts, words as an art form were widely used.
That's right, Holland. And, when you think about the early dramatic performances of the Greek classic poem Odyssey to some of the current ballad lyrics and some of the blues artists, words are powerful. And to help us better understand the impact of the spoken word, we have two expert guests.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
And our first is Jah Smalls. He's a coach, poet, and a performer. His bio includes these two words, relentless and resilient. On his Facebook page, he has this quote, "We can heal the world one stanza at a time. Let's make history together." So, Jah, we are so excited to have you at the Afterword table. What is keeping you busy these days?
Oh, goodness. Why would you go there? I have so many projects. So COVID came in and kind of shut everything down. Before Sunday, I haven't been on a microphone since early March. And for the past 7 years, I've been on a microphone at some place at least once a month for 7 years. So it had really been a bit much and everything slowed down. But recently, oh gosh, I've been slamming events. I have video I need to finish. We just started a drive-in open mic poetry event that is amazing. And I'm so happy we just started that. So yeah, I'm sure Jim can fill in on that too, but it's like probably the best thing for me right now.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome.
And our other guest tonight, Jim Dukes, has one of the most interesting backgrounds of the guests that we've had. He went from blowing things up to creating and teaching healing art. Currently, he's the executive director at the Charlotte Art League. Welcome, Jim, to the Afterword podcast. So you can share a little bit about what you're working on.
Well, hey, it's good to be here. I appreciate y'all having us. At the Charlotte Art League, it's an exciting time for us. We are revisioning what we're doing at Charlotte Art League. We've been doing online exhibits and just starting with some live exhibits. As Josh said, we just started a drive-in. We have a big parking lot and a loading dock that we use as a makeshift stage. And so last weekend was our first event with him and his crew doing a poetry slam drive-in. So that's going to continue every Sunday, and we're going to do other events like that to bring people out in the community. We've got other big community art exhibits that are in the works, some special community large-scale painting projects, but ultimately we're innovating the way we look at art, and I'm challenging our artists to look at the why of our art and making our house more inclusive.
I really like that, knowing the why. Look at the why behind the art. That's very interesting, and I would imagine opening maybe some other doors, other people.
Yeah, I mean, you can make art all day long, and anybody can paint. Well, you can paint a landscape, right? You could
not unless they're stick people. Not.
Well, I've seen stick people art, but called art. But the thing of it is, what is your why? And I ask that to every new artist. I ask it to every other artist. I ask it to the artists that are members, and base that question on your sales and what story are you telling to people that want to come in and potentially purchase your art. Is why do you do what you do, and what is the story behind it? Do you just do it, or is there a purpose?
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. All right, so John, we're gonna hit you with the first question. What has the impact of words been on your life, And how did you get involved with spoken word art?
I have always been a writer of some sort. I remember, I love telling people this, in elementary school, I used to write poems for my friends to give to the girls that they like. And I was doing this in middle school. Now, I could have been really rich had I thought about selling it, but I didn't, like a fool. But they got over on me. But I've been writing since then. Writing, as far as moving forward to the more performance part of it, really took place after my depression. After I went through my depression. And then I didn't realize that I was helping myself prepare for therapy by writing and allow myself to be open and vulnerable enough to share it. So performance poetry, slam poetry, those things had started really out of me actually allowing myself to no longer be a prisoner to what I'm going through and actually find a way to convey it in my words and through my work. And that has been what has taken me to this level. Did that answer your question? I hope it did.
Absolutely. And again, this is you. This is how it has impacted your life. And when you say you found a way to get out of your prison through your words, I think you almost answered Jim's question is, what's your why?
Yeah. And the thing is, I want to add to that. I'm an advocate for mental health, right? And the importance of having a mental health check-in regularly. And a lot of people that, some that refuse to go to therapy or some that don't know how to use therapy have not done the beginning processes for you to receive therapy. And I found that writing had been the beginning portion for myself, and it has helped a lot of people. I can go see a doctor any given day, right? But if I don't tell the doctor that my finger's hurting, he's not going to be able to diagnose me with a broken finger. So any kind of therapy you go to, if you're not willing to say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, there's no way it's going to help you. And I think writing has been a catalyst for that.
Yeah, that's great. Colin, that kind of goes right along with the episode we just had with Terry Lee and Catherine Green McCreight on mental illness and suicide prevention. So that's a great, again, another segue and a iteration of that important thing to talk about. Thank you.
Yeah, well, actually, my follow-up question is, do you still write poetry for guys to give to girls? And if you do, how much do you charge?
So now, obviously there's a small fee, right? But it also depends on how much you need. So is it just like an alley-oop, or do I have to give you the whole 4 quarters because that's a whole different ballgame?
I'll have to get back to you, but now I've got your information, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, as an art director, and incidentally, one of my former bosses was an art director. She was the art director for Science Magazine and for Highlights for Children. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as an art director until I went to work for her. And then I learned all about it and why art directors are important. But as an art director, why did you choose to put this exhibit on display, something that highlights spoken word?
Okay. Well, so oddly, I'm the executive director, so I'm steer the ship, and we have a committee, an exhibits committee. As executive director, we kind of look at everything we're doing and trying to figure out how we can be successful on multiple levels. So we looked at our exhibits and said we need to do something different, and different in a lot of ways. But with spoken word, there's always a debate. We have a lot of writers and poets as members of, we have 200 member artists at Charlotte Art League. So we're a pretty big operation. We take up 10,000 square feet. So we're a big space. So there's always this debate about, which is more impactful, words or images. We always like to banter that debate around, and that came up, had been coming up a lot, and then I was faced with an insult and reminded myself, but they're just words, so don't let them hurt you. But then as I thought more about that, I thought those words had weight, and the more I examined that, the more I thought, the spoken word and writers and poets, It's an unexamined, unspotlighted art form. And a lot of writers and poets don't consider themselves artists. Am I right, Ja? Right? So I wanted to give a wide berth to this thought of just words, and really see how creative our local artists could be with this wide berth of an idea. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of an opening shot of, I'm going to push you. Be prepared, because long gone are the days of exhibits called Purple. And, we're going to dig into some real hard stuff. And so this is, just kind of a shot across the bow of, let's really examine and really use art to test ourselves and to test the community and push and examine and see what we come up with. I think artists get complacent, and I think you do what you do, and people buy your stuff, and you go on with your life, and you do your thing, and but then you're hit with the opportunity of something new and different and weird, and it just kind of like a needle across the record, and it's like, what do I do with this? And so I want more needle across the record. I want more, what is this? How do I respond to this artistically? And that's how we start to formulate conversation, and that's how we start learning from each other and get experimentation going and innovation going. So that's kind of how that evolved.
Several times as you were talking, there was a look that crossed Ja's face. Is there something you wanted to put in there?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's much I can add to it. I will say that a lot of poets that I've met that are what we call page poets, who don't do what performance poetry or slam poetry or spoken word, they don't call themselves artists, and I guess I can't say they don't see the art in their work, but it's again because they're actually living through this work. And if you don't see it that way, you're not going to be as you're not going to live up to your potential. And if you're living through your work, you actually, it becomes art. It is what it is. So Jim actually nailed it when he said that.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And kind of leads us right into the next question. And this is for both of you, so I don't care who answers first. Mm-hmm. Why do art forms have the ability to communicate across barriers and produce healing?
You want to go first, Jim?
Why do art forms have the ability to communicate across barriers and produce healing? Why? Art is an interesting, non-threatening form of communication. Going back to what Josh said about therapy, we use art. I use art as healing, to teach healing art and to veterans and trauma survivors. And if you're in a therapy session and you're knee to knee with somebody and you got an hour to spill your guts, it's kind of uncomfortable. Or if you're in a group setting, oh my God, that's even worse, right? But if you're in an environment where you've got the opportunity to express yourself in a variety of non-threatening environments where perfection isn't a requirement, where you're allowed to throw that out the door. Yes, you got to wrestle with the type A personalities and let them, give them the confidence to stow that away for a while. But what it allows you to do, and there's multiple art forms from, improv. I usually get people going by playing stupid, silly games, acting like kids, cussing, telling silly stories, being silly, just breaking down barriers, cutting stuff out of magazines with kindergarten scissors, working in groups around a common answering a common question, and that's how you facilitate communication. And it's a tool that I've seen work. Man, do I have time to tell one story and not take any time from Jah?
You've got plenty of time. Go for it.
Okay. So first couples Vietnam veterans healing art workshop that I did, I had planned all this whole 2-hour thing out, and there was like 10 couples in there. So this one couple that had this whole thing planned out, and they were going to do these canvases, and this one couple comes in, and the guy came in and he just went and he got a canvas and some paint and some brushes, and he went and sat down, and his wife got a magazine and she went and sat down, and they totally ignored me for the first 30-45 minutes, and they just leaned into each other and they talked back and forth, and they leaned in and they talked, and he's just leaning over at the waist just painting. And I was working with everybody, getting everybody going. And once they were on autopilot, I went and checked in with them, and I sat down and talked. And it turned out they got married the day before he shipped off to Vietnam, and they'd been together ever since. And he survived Hamburger Hill. And I don't know if you know much about Vietnam battles, but it was one of the bloodiest battles of Vietnam. And he was just painting leaves and flowers from memory, and his wife was reading a magazine, and they were just talking about life. And he said to me, it's just a country guy. He said, I've just been a wrench turner and a welder my whole life, and this is the first time I've ever felt relaxed. And so now when they come back, all he does is he just goes and he gets his canvas and his paint, and his wife gets a magazine, and that's what they do. That's their thing. And so, he would totally cross that barrier of reluctance and opened him up, and is consistently producing healing.
I really appreciate that story, and that phrase that you said, that it's non-threatening communication and that perfection is not a requirement.
Right.
I think that's so important.
Right. Like Jah will agree, when you create art based on feelings and emotions aren't right or wrong. They just are. And so if you're creating art based on your feelings and emotions, your art's not right or wrong. It just is what it is. And when you tell people that, they're like, oh, okay, well, the light bulb goes off, and they're like, really? I don't have to be Bob Ross. I don't have to be Picasso. I can just let my crap just hang out. Yeah, that's all you got to do. So, takes the pressure off.
That's right. How about you, Jah?
Jim, first, I want to remind you to let's have that talk about Hamburger Hill. Like, it just sent off another thing. That's just where the mind goes. Art is the multi-language tool. And I say that to say, I'll use an example. How many people I love opera, by the way. I used to get teased, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and like nobody my age wanted to go see opera, but I loved going to opera since elementary school. But think about this. We go to operas, and if we're not familiar with the opera, we don't know what they're saying. We don't know the language is, you know what I'm saying? We don't know, but we're hearing this beautiful sound. We're watching them do whatever they're doing on stage, right? And they're acting out this thing. We don't know what they're saying unless we're reading on the top, right? How many people are just stunned and don't even know the language? We don't even know the story. Art is that thing. So if you could actually look in a person's face and not know a thing. You don't understand the language, but their pain comes through in their performance. Their excitement comes through in their performance. You know what I mean? You ever turn the TV and before the volume's up for you to hear it, it looks like, oh my gosh, something is happening. That is the beautiful thing about art. It doesn't matter what your background is, what you're going through in this moment. There is something in art that can change your whole way of thinking and feeling in an instance. So for me, I mean, and that's all art. Music, I'm a big Donny Hathaway fan. I love John Coltrane, jazz. I mean, I'm a big hip hop fan. Old stuff, though, old stuff. I don't do the new stuff. But, all these things, it's a form of art. And then I can go right and leave the hip hop club and go right to an opera, and I'll feel right at home. Because it's the artist, the mastery in that multi-language tool that crosses all genres. Yeah, I hope I answered the question because I know I went off, but I just...
You did.
You did. And Helen, I'm waiting for you to jump in and talk about opera.
Why do you think I'm going to talk about opera?
Because that's the only that you said on our episode that we talked about music, that was the genre that you liked.
I had forgotten saying that. I probably said it just to get a reaction. But
Okay.
actually, when I had never really even understood what opera was, but in 7th grade in choir, it was the way music was structured at school. If you could play an instrument, you were in band. If you couldn't, you got stuck in choir. So I couldn't, therefore I got stuck in choir. Not because I could sing. And in order to make higher than a C, we had to do these extra credit projects. And one of the choices we had was watching this TV show called Who's Afraid of the Opera? Yeah. And so we didn't have a TV, but our landlord did. So we went over to the landlord's house and watched Who's Afraid of the Opera. And what it was there were these little puppets, and they would come out and they would tell you what was going to happen next. And then you'd watch the next part of the opera with all the singing and the pageantry, and then that scene would close, and then the puppets would come back and they would discuss it, and then they would tell you what was going to happen, which is the only way I understood what was going to happen. And after that, I liked the opera. I never really even understood why people didn't like it. But I think it probably had to do with what you're talking about. People didn't understand it. Well, I understood the first opera I saw because those puppets were explaining it to me every so often. But yeah. Well, I wanted to move the conversation just a little bit in a different direction. When Amy first sent me a link to this exhibit and said, what do you think about this topic? And I saw just words, I assumed that this was an art exhibit on social justice. Mm-hmm. I did not realize that it was spoken word. But I think it's a good question to stick in here, right? How can spoken word art be a force for social justice?
So if I said to you, if you stand on my foot, it's going to hurt really bad, right? General sentence. And then I say to you, if you stand on my foot, it's going to hurt really, really bad. It changes the whole way it's being said. So if I say the police are unjust, the police do this, the police do that, we've all said that. But when I take that sentence, the police are unjust, and I expand it in a way, it makes you think about it from a whole different perspective. And the thing I love about spoken word, I don't care if it's funny, if it's sad, if it's depressing, it stretches whatever you're feeling. Whatever you're feeling when you're saying it, people believe it. You know what I mean? They believe it. So if you deliver a message in your work, whether it's social justice, whether it's justice in itself, right? Whatever message you're delivering, if you marry it, it doesn't matter how it was written, marry the wording, and you deliver in such a way, it's going to bend some folks. I'm in a Zoom every Friday. I'm glad you asked that question, with some, I can't name them, but some VIPs and some political folks. I don't like politics, but some political folks. And the question is, how do we fix this social justice issue? And you know why I was invited to this group that I'm not a part of this membership with? Because I do spoken word. Because I do raw spoken word when I need to. And every week somebody's crying when we're delivering, after I deliver a poem. So that's, not only do I think it works, I can see it working.
What do you think, Jim?
So the question is how spoken word as an art form can impact social issues?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of justice issues that we're talking about as a nation right now. Right. And if we want to think about those more powerfully, how can we use spoken word? How can spoken word art be part of helping people understand what those issues are and grapple with them a little more effectively?
Oh, yeah. Make people, okay. All right. You know what I want to say, Jah? So, I like to push things, and I always have ideas. My assistant director always threatens to put a shock collar on me. And after our last Jah's spoken word event, the drive-in last Sunday, we were talking about subsequent events. And in September, our exhibit at Charlotte Art League is Envisioning a Nonviolent Charlotte. Not an easy topic. And, we developed that back in January of, December, January. Just as a result of just what the homicide rate was back then in Charlotte. And, that was prior to the riots and protests and Black Lives Matter, and which, after John and I had a meeting on Monday, and I said, all right, I'm going to throw something at you about September. And he said, what's that? As a result of coming on board Charlotte Art League, I've developed a good relationship with our CMPD Community Resource Unit. They're our unit that helps bridge gaps and build bridges. So I said, I got an idea. I said, I listened to you, and what our goal with Charlotte Art League is to provide a platform for all sides to speak and for everybody to be heard. So we are, the Switzerland we're neutral territory, but we want to help solve problems, and we're doers. I'm not just a talker. I'm a doer. So I said, how do you like this idea? I contact CMPD, and we get a bunch of police officers together with you, me, and another poet in our midst who's a former gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps from Vietnam. And we take them and teach them to write poetry. And you teach them how to deliver poetry. And then in September, during the exhibit month of Envisioning a Nonviolent Charlotte, we do a poetry night where officers and poets deliver heartfelt poetry. And we see life from both sides. And John's like, oh, crap. All right, let's do it. His face lit up, and he's like, you're speaking my language now. And proposed it to CMPD, and I got a thumbs up the next day. And so that's probably going to be one of the more impactful art and community events that we'll have, because so much spoken word tends to be one-sided, and we need to, as a society, listen with both ears and with our hearts. And John and I both have had multiple conversations that we both have friends that we love dearly in law enforcement, and we understand. We see issues from both sides in general. John and I can be impartial and can speak from our heart and speak from pain and everything else. So, it's just going to be a great opportunity to hear messages from both sides and allow us to use spoken word to humanize each other and to allow each other to be seen as family members and parents and people that have fears and sadness and love. And we like cake, and, we breathe air together, and, we freaking wear socks. There's common ground in there somewhere we can start from. And so that's our goal. We probably won't solve anything that night, but it's going to be a good start, and you got to start somewhere. And outside of us, you guys are the first two to hear about it.
Congratulations.
That's very cool.
Holland, I know I've been writing notes furiously, but the words that are sticking in my brain right now are building bridges, expanding, stretching feelings, and helping to deliver a message. And so I think
you're going to turn all that into a spoken word and put it on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
All right. So before we close out part one, Jah,
yes.
What's the essential element that we need to understand as we consider art and the spoken word?
I think I'm going to kind of go back to what Jim just said, the human part, and understanding that, it takes a lot to write about your own pain, right? We're so used to coming to the rescue for someone else. And when we're writing, I'll use myself for example. I'm a victim of gun violence. I was gunned down at 19 years old. I had 4 bullets in me at one time, still 1 bullet lodged in my jawbone today. I'm 47, and I've dealt with this for a long time. What happens when I'm rescuing everyone else and I don't have someone to rescue me? And we have to remember, sometimes we're rescuing ourselves through spoken word. Sometimes we are saying these things because we've been carrying this boulder. We've been carrying this load for so long and never getting the right moment and having the right words in that moment to deliver, hey, this is what I'm carrying, right? And I think that when people start to realize, yes, I'm doing a performance poem, but I'm actually telling you what I'm going through in my life. I'm actually telling you what I'm dealing with. The same thing with artists. When you're watching them paint and you can see some of the painting is just real, it looks fierce. It looks almost violent, right? Because they're going through something in what they're seeing to make this image come out. It's the same thing. I can only put in what I have in this piece. And I think with spoken word, a lot of people just look at it as if, oh, that was so nice. And I'm like, I'm dying here. I've been holding this secret for 40 years. I finally had a chance to say it. And I think people need to understand that part.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is an essential element.
That was really powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
How about you, Jim?
I think that essential elements we need to know is that art is a conversation starter. And that with visual art, you want to listen with your eyes for the message. And with spoken word, you want to listen with your heart for the message. That's all I got.
I'm just trying to absorb all of these essential elements. Both of these are so key. Wow. Holland, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, because I think we should wrap up and start start talking for our next episode right now, so we can hang in there with this.
Sounds good.
I just really quick want to say thanks to Jim and Jim from Charlotte League and Jah Smalls for participating with us tonight on the importance of the spoken word as an art form. Please join us next week as we continue to talk with them on this topic. And while you're waiting for the rest of the conversation, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about us. You are welcome, as always, at our table.